love doing it.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, everybody. And I am so excited to be sharing my time today with Kristi Coulter. And she's going to share a little bit more about her story with us. And then we're going to chat about all of the things and dig in deep to her latest book and just her recovery journey. So, Kristi, I'm going to turn the mic over to you and share a little bit more with us about your story.
Sure. So I have been in recovery for just over 10 years now. This is amazing to me. I remember thinking there was a time I thought I couldn't go a day, which I know is a lot of people can probably relate to that. I was 43 when I got sober. And before that, I remember thinking, am I too old to get sober? Like, no, I was not. You're never too old. Before that, I would say probably what people now call a gray area drinker for many years. I could stop. I just didn't want to. Once I started, I was very much a wine drinker. I kind of fell into the whole, to be an empowered woman is to be a drinker, to, I deserve this. It's me time. It's self-care. It's all that stuff that I think in the culture we now sort of recognize as problematic. I probably had my first drink when I was, aside from like a sip of champagne at a family wedding, when I was probably 16. It was a Bartles and James wine cooler, which Gen X listeners will probably be familiar with. And from then I progressed to Boone's Strawberry Hill wine, which seemed very fancy. It was very big. And it just made me social. I was a kid who felt very awkward, never really knew how to, what to do with my hands in conversation, that kind of thing. And it made me comfortable. And so I was like, well, this is great. It's all set now. I have my tool, and I drank through the rest of high school. I was kind of a club kid in the 80s, going to clubs and, new wave clubs and gay bars and doing poppers and drinking a lot and, little cocaine here and there. It made me, I was smart enough to be like, wow, I'm already an anxious person. I don't need any more cocaine in my life. Like I had that presence of mind. 17-year-old. Thank God.
Not do that.
It's like, this is just not going to help you at all. Just and the drinking probably was a better choice. And through college, and then in my 20s and a lot of my 30s, it was really easy for me not to feel like I had a problem. Partly because when you're young, a lot of people drink like you do. In your early to mid 20s. And also, I never drank during the day. Like I only drank at night. I wasn't waking up shaking. I thought, well, I don't have a real problem because I don't have these things you read about. Like I didn't look like the men in movies who, are in the gutter and drinking at 11 in the morning. I was different, and I was successful too. I had good jobs. I got promoted all the time. I had a solid marriage with a husband who also happened to love to drink, which I was like handy, and, we were just doing fine. And so when I was 36, we'd been living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I had a job that was sort of cozy, but boring. It had become boring. It didn't start that way, but I'd run out of new things to do. And I got an offer from Amazon.com, this little company in Seattle that was becoming quite well known. In fact, by then, Amazon was probably the most famous retailer on the planet, but just a fraction of what it is now. And so we were looking for, we wanted to get out of the Midwest. We wanted to do something new. So we said, sure, let's do it. And packed up and with our dog and moved to Seattle. And I worked at Amazon for the next 12 years. And my drinking just really, and this is, partly what my book is about, my drinking really ramped up. I was probably going from 2 glasses of wine a day to 3, and then 3.5, and then 4, and then sometimes more than that. That was basically how I spent my evenings. And a lot of it was to deal with just the incredible pressure of working at Amazon, a pretty brutal work environment. And it got to the point where, and I kidded myself a lot, this is just being fancy. I was making a lot of money and I got really into wine, like, oh, I'm an aficionado. I'm not just a drinker. We're going wine tasting, just all this stuff. And wine legitimately is an art. Like, I'm not saying it isn't, but I was not really treating it that way. And it got to the point that I couldn't think about anything but my drinking because I worried so much about it. And I kept thinking, well, I need to deal with my anxiety. And once I've dealt with that, I'll quit drinking. So I had therapy. I tried hypnotherapy, acupuncture, everything, because I wanted to stop drinking. I wanted to suddenly be like, I'm calm now and I don't need to drink anymore. And eventually I got to a point where I thought, this is not going to work. I'm going to have to quit, even though I don't want to. Maybe the only way to stop worrying about drinking is to actually stop drinking. So the last thing I wanted to do, I was really furious. But I just woke up one day and I thought, that's it. I have to give this a shot. And that was my last drink. I mean, it's been 10 years since then. I think within a couple of weeks, I realized I had absolutely done the right thing for myself. I was like, none of my fears had come true. I was convinced I would never sleep again. That was not true. I didn't think I could get through a night without drinking. That proved untrue. So basically every day I was proving new things to myself, and my nervous system started to settle down. Not right away, but within weeks. And I was like, wait a second. So my anxiety started to go away when I quit the drinking instead of the other way around. And I guess within like 2 months, I was like, this is it. I had committed to 100 days for myself through a website called Tired of Thinking About Drinking, which I think is pretty well known now. Yeah, Belle's website. And I thought, no, this is good. And part of it also was just the relief of knowing I had done the thing. And I also got to feel successful every day. And I was such a high achiever. And Amazon was someone in the New York Times once said, Amazon is where overachievers go to feel bad about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It basically never feel like a high achiever, even though everyone who works there is a high achiever. So I had not felt successful in years. And suddenly I was like, oh, if I just don't drink, I'm kind of like, I won the day. Like that was amazing. It was the best thing that could happen for me. And that momentum kind of kept me going. I didn't do AA. I was in therapy and I stayed with therapy. I've sort of dabbled in AA, but I feel like I basically ended up doing kind of all the parts and pieces of AA without the actual AA,
Yeah.
Alcoholics a lot. I had a lot of therapy. I introspected, I wrote, I changed my habits. I sometimes change my friends, like all those kind of things, and look deeply at the reasons that I had been drinking. And at this point, after a few years, I kind of stopped thinking about it all the time. My sobriety became like who I am. But I still have to stay in touch with those elements. If I start to feel wobbly, and wobbly for me doesn't mean I think I might drink, because I have no interest in drinking. It just means, that feeling of just being not emotionally sober, which is huge. And it's an ongoing, I'm always vulnerable to that. I always have to stop and think, okay, well, what are you not doing right now? Are you not exercising enough? Are you not getting enough rest? Do you need to talk to someone who understands this? Sometimes it's literally, are you giving yourself enough credit for not drinking? I mean, my mother died during the pandemic. I'm not of COVID, but very early. I basically partly because of that, and also because of the isolation, sort of had like an emotional breakdown. I was trying to write this book. I mean, there were all kinds of things falling apart in my life. And I was forgetting to say, well, you're not drinking. That's amazing. And when I remembered to think that, it really helps. So I like to, I know there's some people in recovery think, well, I'm always in danger of relapse. It's true, but I like to think of myself as always succeeding, like just kind of flip it. Like, look at what you're doing. You're still sober. And so it's been 10 years. And I would say at this point, I really am just focused on sort of staying emotionally sober. I think I definitely used love and sex as substitutes for a while, which I know now is common. I certainly use sugar as substitute.
Mm-hmm.
I still do sometimes.
Yes.
I think of it as you sort of upgrade your addictions. But I feel like I just wouldn't want that stuff in my body. I love the clarity of being sober. I love being like a reliable person most of the time. And I also wouldn't have become a writer without sobriety. I had started writing very young. I was successful very young. I got a graduate degree in creative writing, and I just didn't have the stamina in my 20s. So I'd quit by the time I was 30, thinking, well, that didn't work out. I'm not famous yet. So therefore, it's all over for me because I was such an achiever. And I came back to writing at 44. And I've now published, 2 books with a major publisher. And sobriety gave me a story, but it also just gave me the stamina and the discipline to do difficult things. So I wouldn't be here if I hadn't gotten sober. I mean, I think I would still be alive. I wouldn't be where I am in life. And I think I would probably not live as long a lifespan either. I mean, that was not going to work out well for me. And also my husband got sober about 6 months after I did. So we've both been sober now for, almost, he'll be a decade later this month. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing all that. And I'm so happy for both of you. What a blessing it is for the two of you and your partnership to share on what is really truly an intimate journey, of emotions, of change, of growth, so many things, and really the need to take a look at front and center what's going on with us on the inside. And that's what it's all about. It really is, what is going on with us. And that's what the questions that we don't want to ask. These are the kinds of things that we don't have any interest in even considering, because I don't know about you, but for me, I thought alcohol was the glue that was keeping everything together, even though I was completely dysfunctional and had all kinds of stuff happening in my life. I mean, to me, this was the thing. This was it that was keeping me good,
That too. And it's funny, and we're sold that, it's like, oh, I just need wine. Like, I wrote my writing career got kicked off because I wrote an essay about 7 years ago called Anjali, about like just the ways that wine is sold to women. And you can go to any upscale supermarket or greeting card store, and half the cards are about women and wine, or you just need more wine. And we're told this is the thing that's keeping us together. And sometimes it's the thing that's, first of all, it's never helping. And for a lot of us, it's actually making things worse.
And we don't need it. I mean, alcohol is not something that is necessary. It's actually made from ethyl alcohol, which is a poison. We color it and flavor it up to make it palatable for humans, but it's not necessary for life, like food or water. And you mentioned that the greeting cards and things. I mean, when I got sober in 2002, 6 months later, I was pregnant with my first child, and then I had 3 kids in 4 years. But thankfully, I was sober, obviously, but then I kind of missed all of that glamour, glitter cups, and mommy wine time, and the fireside chats and stuff. That kind of all came in this last decade.
That's
so
true.
I was like, I feel it breaks my heart all the time when I see so much of that on our Instagram feeds and things. I mean, whether you're a mother or you're not, or just whoever, but it's just so hard to see this becoming the focus of everybody's attention. And as a mom and as somebody who, cares deeply about children and people in general, like I would never want them to think like I needed wine to get through my time with them. Like it just hurts my heart so much to see that happening for women. And I know it sounds like you wrote some really good pieces on that too. And Ann Dowsett Johnson wrote that book all about, I interviewed her last year or sometime on the podcast about her work with why women drink. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
astounding.
And I think women they need help. I mean, they need, they need sometimes maybe good childcare so they can have some time alone or something. It's like the things that moms need it's not wine, it's support.
Well, and yeah, that's a whole nother podcast, right? So, so I would love to get into a little bit more on the high achieving piece of you. And I think so many women can relate to that, no matter what your job or role is, whether it's, running your family as the mom, or you're a high level executive, or you're starting your own company, or whatever roles we have, we're all leaders, and doing something. But some of us have personalities that are more of that achievement as a value kind of bent, right? And it sounds like for you, that was, you knew that from the early stages of life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you kind of knew, your parents probably knew that about you and said things, teachers.
Absolutely. I'm from a family of high achievers. My dad and his brothers are from this like small Southern town, and they all went and got PhDs in the sciences. I mean, it's like everybody was just like, I'm going to push my academic career as far as I can. I think from the age of 3, like I was reading, I just was, I was kind of a smart kid. And then I also love that dopamine hit of being praised for being smart.
Sure.
And I liked learning and I liked reading. So I was a huge achiever in school. And there's actually a bit in my book where I'm just sobbing after school at age 5 because I had gotten an N for not satisfactory on a worksheet, because you were supposed to color in pictures with the A sound, and I'd colored in all the pictures because I got excited. And the teacher was just horrified, like this child is just sobbing. And my mom drove up and was like, what happened? And they were both like, hey, it's not that big a deal. You just got a not satisfactory. And I was just like, no, it's, like never again, never again. I was so upset. And I so much in my life like that. And I mean, sometimes I still do. So I was, the kid who won all the prizes in high school, and then big achiever. I went to a college that didn't have letter grades, but I still was very hyper focused on achievement. And in my career, I was like the girl who got promoted every year, just like clockwork. And when I got to Amazon, it was a place where, there's so much to do and the jobs are so hard that you really can't overachieve. And that is like a perfect storm for someone who needs to overachieve, because it's like being on a hamster wheel, or you're chasing like this prize that just keeps getting snatched from you. So I was really set up to kind of lose it then.
Well, and it just, from the sounds of it anyway, it just doesn't seem like it was the environment. Not only were the jobs hard, but as a person who had maybe a personal core value of achievement with like a love language of like words of affirmation, and like you enjoyed that praise, it doesn't sound like there was really much of that at all happening. It was in fact a lot of the opposite, where you were criticized a lot, or things were pointed out, and you're like, geez, you're just kind of getting beat down from all angles with no put-ups at all. And so it is sort of the perfect storm for somebody who then also has like a little bit of a propensity for maybe an addiction, because now, like, where do you turn? Like, where is your joy coming from? Where was anything coming to fill your cup?
Yeah. And the people who work there, of course, your coworkers try to lift you up. And I had like individual managers who were really lovely and like, thank you, nice job. But the culture, when the corporate culture doesn't support that, you are sort of getting beat down by the system. And also what happens is, you'll have bosses or coworkers who are so beaten down themselves that, and I'm sure I did this to the people who worked for me at times, that you just forget to thank people. You forget to say, hey, nice job, because you're just trying to keep your own head above water. So it's just this sea of people who in regular life are just perfectly nice people who were just kind of like desperate. And yeah, and then alcohol is there. I mean, it was a culture where there was drink. I mean, it's not like people were walking around swigging vodka during the day, but people kept bottles of whiskey on their desks. And at 5 o'clock, it would be like, oh, let's have a drink. And then we'll get back to work. There were a lot of like team events around wine tasting and making beer and, beer Tuesdays and things like that. So alcohol was like a reward. And if you are someone who already has a propensity, to your point, for drinking too much of it, then, really not good.
Literally the perfect storm. I mean, you could just see it sort of happening in the book too. Like you just, you're kind of like, listen, watching this whole thing unfold. And I'm like, wow. But I loved the part that resonated, not the part, but one of the things that stood out to me that told me exactly who you are, only because it related to me so much, is when you talked about when you started running and you said, if 2 days is good, 3 days is better, or 3 days is good, 5 days. So you were like, whatever, I want to start running. So you're just new, but then you're going to amp it up to like 3 times what you should start doing. And that's so me. Like, I totally get that. And I was like, oh, this is the alcoholic in her,
It's always been funny to me how many people who, when they first get sober, start running. Yes. And I think partly because you need something to burn. You're looking for the endorphins.
Yes.
Usually happens first as you're like, what endorphins? This is terrible. But you keep doing more and more. And yeah, I mean, I ignored this twinge in my eventually it became a stress fracture. And I was in a boot for like 2 months because I just wouldn't be like, oh, I'm injured. I should take some time off. I was like, no, I can fight through this. And like, no, you can't actually fight through a bone injury.
That's I totally respect that and appreciate it on all the levels. So I'm curious, one of the things that I focus on in my world with the community I work with is women who have been sober for, after the first year, right? So about a year to many, many years, right? But because I always say that first year is kind of like a baby, you're like an infant, you're in like a crisis, maybe not really a real one, but like your body, your mind, your relationships, your health, you might be in trouble. There's just so many things that are going on during that time, and you're unpacking it all. I mean, I know for me, I had to kind of relearn how to brush my teeth twice a day, how to feed myself properly, not exercise 5 times a day, things like that. But then once we get to closer to a year, then to many more, we start to wake up, right? There's this awakening that happens, and the identity work really starts. Questions like, who am I now that I'm this sober person? Or what do I want for my life? I saw some of this unfold towards the end of your book, when I'll let you share it. But like, we get the desires of our heart start to bubble up, because now suddenly things are possible. There are opportunities that become possible to us that seemed nowhere even near that, but just a year ago when we were at the end of our drinking. So I'm curious if you would be willing to share with the community, because I know they would love to hear what your like kind of after your first year was like, and kind of stepping into all of the stuff I just mentioned, like how that unfolded for you.
I mean, it's true that first year, you're just trying to get through like your first Valentine's Day, your first visit to your parents' house, your first flu, your first argument with your spouse, just get
holiday
through
time, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then I started to notice in year 2 and year 3, it was more about like, well, what do I want? One thing that I had to do when I got sober was I had to be really nice to myself for the first time in maybe decades, maybe my whole life. I couldn't punish or loathe myself into being sober. I had to be like, no, you're doing this because you're worth investing in. And so that was revelatory. And even on a day-to-day basis, it would be like, well, do you not want to eat this? Do you not want this tuna sandwich you brought for lunch? Well, let's go get something else. Like just little things, like let's actually eat something you want to eat. And so my creativity started coming back. Mm-hmm. And, I started writing again, just little, I started a blog, and it was anonymous, and it was like, had like 5 readers, but I had noticed there was this big sober blogosphere, and I was reading sober blogs every night. And I thought, well, I just want to be part of this conversation. So I started writing there, and then gradually, more publicly. But I think I really just, I kind of came back to things I had left off when I started drinking a lot, so my creativity, just reading more. I never stopped reading, but I was like, oh, I can focus now. So I can read a lot more at night. And it kind of was like picking up some of my girlhood self. The girl who was 17 or 18 and full of ideas and aspirations, like that came back. And I felt so much younger. I mean, I felt much younger at 45 than I had at 35.
Wow.
I feel younger at 53 than I did at, not 45, but 30, 38 or 42 or something than before I quit drinking. So I think that was a lot of it. And the other thing is I learned to set boundaries because I had to. I realized like I had to protect my own need for rest. I had to protect my own time. So I ended up being a drinker for half my Amazon career and sober for half. I didn't plan it that way, but that's what happened. And I realized quickly that if I was going to stay sober and stay at Amazon, I would need to change some things. So I just got better at being like, no, I'm not available to meet at 6 p.m. because I have yoga then, and I would set these boundaries and like the sky did not fall. I did not get fired. People did not yell at me. It turned out that if I just set them, they would be respected for the most part. And that was huge.
It is huge. I'm so thankful that you shared that, because especially people with your personality style and the way that you like to work. I live with somebody like that as well. And I have some of that as well, just a little bit. It comes up differently than yours. It's really important to have healthy boundaries, but it doesn't come naturally to
Yeah.
people who are of that style, because you're always working, you're always thinking about work and not wanting to be disappointment, or not wanting to let anybody down, or getting the work done. I've told my husband, he's been a high level executive our whole life, and he was always complain about people coming in his office,
Right.
and I said to him, shut your door.
Right. Tell them.
Shut your door and put a sign up or a calendar or however you want to handle it that says my office hours are this, this, and this, or I'm in a meeting right now. If you're not in a meeting, I mean, just create a boundary, because you're in charge of your schedule. And he was like, well, I can't do that, and
Yes,
I understand that he wants to have open door policy and stuff, but you're complaining that you're not being able to get your work done
right.
because
Right.
people are hijacking your time.
Right. And
So
if you don't tell people, I
they're
mean,
going to keep doing it.
yeah, because you haven't said anything. So they're not trying to be jerks. They're just like, oh, his door is open. Probably it's fine. And so I actually ended up doing similar things where I would set office hours and say, hey, 2 and 4, like I am just here. I'll be sleeping, but I can drop everything and talk to you. And mostly, there's always like that one person who just doesn't get the message. But it was amazing. Or I would block off time on my calendar to do my own stuff, to do my own work. Or I would leave the building. I work in downtown Seattle, or I worked in downtown Seattle. So I could go to like any one of, 50 coffee shops within a few blocks and just alone. And it was funny when I started doing that, I was like, oh, I know him. I know her. These were people at Amazon who were doing the same thing. So it told me like, oh, it's not just me. Like people want to have their own time. And it was respected. I mean, I just had to set the boundary and realize that setting a boundary isn't mean. It's just how you can be. I was a better employee and coworker when I had boundaries because I wasn't resentful time.
Right. And like actually, and it also honors and respects yourself. So it trains your brain to know that you're doing the things you need to do to take care of yourself. I have another woman who's in my clinical practice, and she's a very high level executive at a hospital system, huge job. And I'm always astounded by her all the time, because she looks amazing. She's always like dressed to the nine, they have to dress there. And she is so strung out to the point now where now she's having physical problems, some physical symptoms that she's had to address, like she's been to the doctor for, right? And at one point she said something about this thing that she was having, and I said she was going to have a CAT scan, and I said, well, when that CAT scan comes back fine, what are we going to do about the situation, because she didn't want to listen to me about the fact that I said, your job is literally killing you.
Yeah.
Your
Right.
job is killing, and until and unless you start to make the choices that you're very capable of making, this the smartest woman
Mhm.
about putting boundaries around your boss and creating space for yourself. She just couldn't do it. Like, she couldn't say to him, I'm not going to work all day and all night on Saturday. I'm
Right.
not going to stay up until 10 o'clock at night every night and then do it again the next day. Like, and
Yeah.
so
And what
I
she needs,
understand it's hard.
it's hard, but like, it sounds like she's in a big leadership role. And it's like,
Yeah.
one thing that I had big leadership roles too. So I had power and leverage. I wasn't, I was acting like I was an entry level employee who just was like, I need to work as many hours as they want. And not that those people should do it either, but I had power to say, like, this is how I'm going to do my job. When you get to this, it means people trust you, they want you there. And I was afraid to use it. And then you're also modeling that for the people beneath you in the organization, which is really unfortunate. I never like expected my own people to work those kinds of hours, but they would see me doing it.
Right.
So even if I said, really don't do this, they would still see me doing it.
Well, they would see you doing it, and it's like any of us, right? Anybody who watches any of us, right? They're going to say, well, does she really mean that? Because like, she's doing it. So like, does she actually want me to stay? And so then it's this whole thing. So if we want to model good leadership, then we need to be doing the things that take care of ourselves.
Right.
And I love the reframe that you use for your drinking. And that's what that was. I mean, you basically just said, I don't focus on that I might relapse. And even in the 12-step programs, I got sober in AA as well. I wouldn't change it for the world, but it's not the only way to get sober. And there's lots of other things that I've added in
Yeah.
over the last decade that are really valuable to me, and I use today. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
You
I
have a
don't even think they're focused on, I mean, they do focus on the relapse, but they're also, the old timers would say things like, well, did you take a drink today? Well, did you take, and I was like, yeah, no, I didn't. You're right. And so that reframe is really important, it's those little put-ups, like, and that's the same thing, in work or after we're sober for a year or so, when we start to change our lives, well, like, did I get up out of bed today and get dressed? Like, not everybody does that.
right.
And it's important for us to remember that not everybody is getting up and taking care of their bodies. Not everyone is, getting up and writing and has goals and dreams about writing another book or visiting their parents or taking care of their dog. I mean, lots of people are not doing those things.
Right. So you have to give yourself credit. And after, once you've been sober for like when I was sober 6 years, it wasn't like, it didn't seem amazing that I didn't have a drink that day. Because clearly I had a lot of history, but it still helps to think when things are really hard, like, oh, think of what you would have once done. And even if I make a choice that's not amazing, even if I don't confront the person I need to confront, but I go to a movie instead or something, I'm like, well, you took the heat out of your brain a little bit. You distracted yourself in a harmless way. You still need to deal with this, but you didn't drink and you didn't do, you didn't like harm yourself actively.
Well, and you
And
didn't make a choice that was harmful to someone else either, that then you were going to have to come back and circle around and make an apology for. Like these things should be commended. We need to be able to recognize, and we need to be able to recognize and give ourselves the credit and acknowledgement that we deserve when things go well. And we also need to give ourselves grace when we make a choice that maybe isn't the best one, whatever that looks like. Maybe you didn't, get up to go for your run that day because you were just like too overtired. Okay, well, you know what? No one's going to die over that. I'm going to be okay. And maybe I'll go for a walk later, or,
exactly.
if you couldn't get 50 pages written today, but you did 30, you're like, you know what? I did 30 pages. Let's celebrate that,
Right. I will hear women sometimes who are very newly sober say, well, I quit drinking, I quit smoking the same day, and I'm giving up sugar. And also, and I'm just like, to bring back like probably at least the sugar for
yeah, just
like,
for a
don't,
minute.
because it feels like it's a drinking, it's sobriety is a self-improvement project instead of a self-love project. And often it's about women who are like, I just want to get my body to look a certain way. And so I'm giving up drinking and everything else. And I just think there's so much more you can get out of this than trying to mold your body into a certain shape. And you can still do that if you want, but you're going to fail if you try to give up everything you enjoy at once.
Well, sustainable change is really important. That's how I teach. It's got to be small, tiny increments over time, for myself included. And sometimes I get annoyed because as a person who has a style that like wants all of it right now and to go as hard as possible, for me, I had a trainer once say to me, I was working on some stuff a few years ago with my health and fitness. And she was like, I was in kind of a bad spot, like emotionally, and I was struggling with different like emotional eating, because that definitely became like a thing for me.
Yeah.
And she said, I just want you to drink a gallon of water a day.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, cool. And like, what else? And she's like, that's it. Like, no, that's not it. Like, what else are we doing? Like, I couldn't handle it. But she wanted me to do it for my 1 to 2 weeks, where I consistently did that. And every day I could give myself the little check that says, you did the thing. You said you were going to do this and you did it. And then we slowly added on other things. But for me, it was so difficult to like wait to
Right.
the time it took to like get to the next thing. It doesn't have to be all at once, because all at once doesn't usually work. It's not sustainable for most people.
Right. And if you build that little micro habit, not that drinking a gallon of water a day is a micro habit, that's a big habit, but then it becomes a habit. And then you're not trying to add 5 habits at once. It's just a thing that you do.
Well, and like when we do those tiny incremental things consistently every single day, over 5 weeks or 6 months, you've done a whole big thing.
Oh yeah.
You started out with this one thing, like running, like, right. You could walk and run a mile for the first week. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, you're running 5 miles. Like, what? You didn't think you were ever going to be able to do that.
And you do it following a program. You don't do it going out and running 5 miles. It's like I think I used, Couch to 5K or something.
Yeah.
Where it was like, oh, just do what the thing says, like recognizing there are experts who have thought about this.
We're not them.
I
love that.
Training too. I've worked out with a weight trainer for many years. And like, I was like, oh, this guy, like, this is what he does. I had this part of my overachiever thing is always thinking I'm somehow smarter at everything than everyone else. No, like, and it's a great,
all of the things.
Yeah. Realize this person, this is what he does for a living. And like, I can trust him and I do what he says. And of course, if something feels weird for my body, then I say, well, my body's not liking this, but and then you see results. Like, it's magic. Imagine. Yeah.
So what are you working on now? And like, what's exciting for you in your life?
The book's been out for just a couple of weeks. I'm still doing a lot of, promotion around the book. I want to write, so I've written 2 memoirs and I want to write a novel next. I'm tired of writing about myself and thinking about myself. So I have a novel that I started many years ago, kind of a romantic comedy / dramedy set in a college town. I love college towns. And I think that's going to be my next book. So I want to get back to that. And I'm doing some teaching this winter, which I do some creative writing teaching, off and on for adults, through writing centers, and excited about that. And what I'm really excited about right now is I'm about to visit Idaho and Montana for the first time. I've lived in the Northwest for almost 20 years now, and I've never seen those states. And so my husband's at a conference, and I thought, what could I do that would be fun? And I'm just not sitting around at home. And I was like, I'm going to take a road trip. I love to travel. I love to travel alone. I mean, I like to travel with him too, but I'm a big solo traveler. And so I'm going to drive to Montana and Idaho and see some landscape I've never seen, and probably go on some hikes and just check it out just for like 6 days,
That's
yeah.
Magical.
I have actually
get to do that. You get to do that today.
Yeah, exactly. I can do this and I feel competent. It's funny. I actually on Saturday got a flat tire, like really flat tire. And I was going to leave this afternoon for Montana. And now I have to go to Discount Tire and probably get a new tire. I don't think it can be patched, but I was able to, I was furious. It was frustrating, but I was like, oh, let's just solve this problem. Like, we'll just work it out. And then you can leave, half a day later than you plan to. And like, that's sobriety, just being like, just solve the problem. It's fine.
You're so right. You're so right, because they never stop coming. I
No.
have 3 older teenagers and a husband and 2 dogs, and there's always something going on here with
Well,
somebody. And usually it's, not a big deal. And then sometimes they are. And I'm just like, all right, well, what do we do now? Like, what's the next? My sponsor, like, thank God for good sponsorship in the beginning. And she used to say, what's the next right thing?
exactly.
And I would just do that. I think of that all the time. I'm like, okay, well, I need to do this, and then I do this, instead of jumping all the way to, well, now we're not going to be able to do la la la, and getting all into the problem.
When I
Just
got
like,
flat, and I've run flat tires, thankfully. So I was able to I was on my way to a book event and I was able to just go there and it was fine. But I remember I immediately was like, well, now what am I going to do? And what if no one has my tire in stock? And and then I just was like, maybe you should slow down and let's think through. And I've had a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy too, where they train you to look at like, okay, what parts of this seem true? What parts of this are not true? Because often with your worst thoughts, like, sure, there's a possibility your tire might not be in stock. Like, okay, what then? But it brings things back to life. And I was able to be like, well, let's just do this event and then we'll go online and see, in your city of 1 million people, maybe there's someone who can help you with your tire.
I think so. I hope that works out for you, and you can get on the road quickly and go see those amazing places. I've never been to either one of those places, so
I'm
I
really,
would love to do that too.
I probably have overinflated expectations of like seeing mountain goats and things like that. But
Oh yeah, I always have overinflated expectations whenever I go somewhere.
world version of Idaho and Montana, but I'm still
I've
gonna
been
go.
on the quest my whole life to find a real moose, like a real live moose. And we went to Banff like a few years ago, and I'm like, yes, finally, we're going to be in moose country. I was out and about. My husband was working. I was looking for this daggone moose, never saw a daggone moose. I
Nope.
was so sad about it.
Yep. It's only when you're not looking. Like I saw a bear in Sedona and I wasn't expecting to see a bear. And I wasn't super happy about it in the moment either.
Ooh.
But later I was like, well, that's kind of cool that I saw a bear and the bear didn't see me. And, it was great.
Well, thank you so much, Kristi, for your time. I know you're super busy with your book and all the tours and everything. So thanks for taking out some time for us. And I know my community is going to really enjoy it. Where do you like people to reach out and connect with you when they want to get a hold of you?
Website is kristicoulter.com. And there is a contact information on there for anyone who wants to drop me a line. I would always love to hear from sober women, sober people, doesn't have to be women. I know that's your audience, and from readers. So, and it's a great place to keep on, find out more about my books and events that I'm doing and, where I'm traveling to, that sort of thing.
Wonderful. I'll make sure all of that is linked below in the show notes. And I'll look forward to crossing paths with you again soon. This is so fun.
Like